guys, this is Doug Jessup with Nate Jones with Xlear. And today, I'm really happy to say that we're doing a success story. And this guy is definitely a success story. So, Nate, you've got a whole bunch of products here, and you started a company 20 something years ago? How long?
25 years ago, quarter of a century now.
Whoa, congrats.
Yeah,
Company is called?
Xlear.
Okay.
Spelled Xlear.
Okay. And you make a bunch of different, now granted, okay, disclaimer, I use all these products, have for years, but where did it all start? What was the product that kind of started the whole journey?
The product that started the whole journey was the nasal spray.
Okay.
It's just a daily hygiene. We brush our teeth, we use mouthwash, we wash our hands with soap and water. But really most of the pathogens that come into our body, bacteria, viruses, pollen, dander, all of that, most of it comes in through our nose.
Right.
And it just makes sense. And my dad actually was the doctor who first started utilizing a xylitol sugar molecule that blocks bacteria and viruses from adhering to the tissue in the upper airway in a nasal spray.
So for people that don't understand, what is xylitol?
It's just sugar. Looks like sugar, tastes like sugar, but it has a different chemical compound than most of the sugars that we're familiar with, which are sorbitol, sucrose, glucose, fructose, sorbitol, mannitol, maltitol. It's missing one carbon atom, and so the bacteria can't metabolize it as effectively.
Now, from what I remember, it actually came about because there was this village in Finland during, I can't remember, was it World War I or World War II?
Well, it was really the whole country of Finland, but when you look at it, it's all a village.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
kidding.
okay.
I'm kidding.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
from Finland.
But
Helsinki's a nice city.
yeah, okay.
So
Well,
is Turku.
yeah, well, tell me the rest of the story, though. What was the deal?
No, it was that during World War II, they didn't have a supply of sugar, and so they started making xylitol. And after the war was over, they went back to just using regular sugar. But about 20 years later, in the 60s, the dentist started noticing that this group of this age group that had come of age when their teeth had come in during the war, when they were eating xylitol, they didn't have tooth decay. And that was something that they were looking at. And so that's when they started doing research and looking at how xylitol prevented tooth decay.
That's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Huge deal. So you go from this group, so you find out that there's all this stuff with regard to helping with cavities. Okay. That's great and wonderful, but I don't understand how in the world you guys go from cavities to nasal spray.
So in the studies where the dentists were looking at how it prevents tooth decay, one of the things that they collected, all the data they collected in these studies, was that the kids who were chewing xylitol gum, not only were they not getting tooth decay, they were also getting 42% fewer respiratory infections.
Oh.
And in 1998, there was a paper that was published in the Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy where they showed that what xylitol is doing is it's actually binding up on receptor sites and it's blocking the bacteria, the strep pneumo, H. flu, and MCAT in that study, from adhering to the tissue. And my dad read that, and when he read that, he said, well, if chewing gum makes you lose 42% of your respiratory infections, these respiratory infections start in the nose. This is the method of action. So he put it into a saline spray and started squirting it up their nose, and the kids stopped getting sick. I mean, it was like night and day.
So what kind of sicknesses did it stop?
Well, he was originally looking at ear infections in babies. Wow. That's what the dental studies had actually reported was ear infections. But most of the kids who have chronic ear infections are also going to have issues with allergies or asthma and other upper respiratory illnesses, because chances are pretty high, like 99%, that they have a bacterial biofilm that is what's causing that chronic issue to happen. And so, when he started using it on these kids with chronic respiratory infections, they would clean out all that crud out of their upper airway and they'd stop getting sick.
Yeah.
And it cleaned up, a lot of them, it cleaned up their allergies, it cleaned up a lot of their other issues that they had.
Well, admittedly, I use the product because of allergies, but the other thing is when we had that fun little COVID crap, it was interesting. I would take it a lot, and I was, at the TV station and everything a lot, and my family and everybody were pretty amazed that I didn't get sick. It's like, well, but so you go from the nasal sprays, and then you started expanding. And so the nasal sprays were 25 years ago. What was your second product?
Our second product was actually chewing gum with xylitol.
Oh, okay.
And that was simply because we had enough people that were calling us and saying, well, I'm buying your nasal spray and I'd like to buy some xylitol gum. Why don't you sell xylitol gum? And so that was we started selling xylitol gum, and pretty quickly Even within a couple of years, we were the number one selling natural. I mean, 100% xylitol sweetened gum in the country.
Out of a little company right here in Utah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, it's not a huge company. I mean, it's but it's all of the natural retailers. I mean, you go into any Sprouts, a Good Earth, any of those stores like that, and our gum is in there, and it's been there for 25 years, and it's selling well.
Okay, now you talked about dental. So, I don't see one here, but I'm pretty sure that you actually make a toothpaste.
We do.
Okay. What makes your toothpaste different than everybody else?
That it has xylitol in it, because the xylitol, it works differently than fluoride, and you can have all the fluoride you want. And really, what that does is that actually makes your enamel stronger and makes your enamel harder, but it doesn't actually address the bacterial infection. We've known for 100 years, this year since 1924, that caries is an infectious disease. It's the infectious disease of strep mutans in your mouth. And if you really want to stop tooth decay, you have to change the paradigm of, let's use fluoride to make your teeth more resistant to the acid. Why don't we get rid of the bacteria that are creating the acid? And that's what xylitol does, is it actually it changes the oral microbiome away from strep mutans bacteria to other bacteria that do not create acid.
You've got a version with and without fluoride. Why?
Because there's a lot of people that don't like fluoride, but if you want to have the dental establishment, the dentist and the hygienist talk about it, the vast majority of them are going to want to be able to say, yes, it has fluoride. But even our fluoride free and our fluoride, they both have something in it called trimetaphosphate, which is a compound that studies have shown remineralizes your teeth even more effectively than fluoride does.
Wow.
About 36% better and stronger and deeper into the enamel than what fluoride does. And those studies are all on our webpage. So if any of the dentists want to go read them, they're more than welcome to go read them.
Okay.
They've been published in the dental literature.
And talking about studies and things of that nature, there was recently a paper that was done with regard to fluoride that is kind of surprising. Tell me some more details on that one.
So it was a meta-analysis. It was done by the Cochrane Review, and it actually came out because there was a court hearing. There was a trial out in California, and the judgment of that, which was heavily weighted by this Cochrane report, stated that the EPA needed to go back and re-examine the data around water fluoridation, because what they said is that putting fluoride in the water, that the best they could see was a 4% decrease in tooth decay. That's 4%, yeah, which is crazy. And I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I understand how fluoride works. It remineralizes your teeth. Granted, it doesn't treat the infection. It does nothing for that. But the reason why it doesn't, we get 4% efficacy today, and 40 years ago, 50 years ago when they did the studies, it was much more effective. It was like 25%. Still not that effective. But the reason why the difference is because it's changes in our dietary habits. We're eating a lot more sugar. We're keeping our mouth, we're grazing all day. And so you're keeping your mouth at a lower pH, more acidic all throughout the day. And your teeth will not remineralize until they're up into the basic space, until after your saliva has brought that back to neutral or base.
Right.
And so that's why fluoride doesn't work as well as what it used to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, without sounding too disgusting, it is kind of interesting. And you and I talked about this, so I'm going to give you a hard time. Basically, Xlear is like the experts on spit and snot. I mean, it's just what it is.
Yeah.
But, that's where all the nasty stuff comes through. I remember interviewing a group of dentists that dealt with veterans. And they told me something that was kind of intriguing, wondering, I want your take on this. They basically said, here are these veterans that are losing teeth and everything, and they're getting all these infections that are severely impacting their lifespan because all the pathogens that come through the mouth.
Well, that's, I mean, that's why oral and nasal hygiene is important.
Yeah.
Most of your medical establishment, your healthcare professionals, think that hygiene is a dirty word, and they're very remiss to actually acknowledge it. I mean, a good example is brushing your teeth with a toothpaste without fluoride is more effective than fluoride at preventing tooth decay. Okay.
Hmm.
But yet, most of your dentists won't even mention or even tell you to brush your teeth unless it has fluoride in the toothpaste. They tell you it has no effect. But if a fluoride toothpaste only, and there's studies showing this, only reduces your incidence of tooth decay by about 25%. The incidence of tooth decay since the 1900s has gotten, I shouldn't say 1900s, 1800s, shows I'm getting old, has actually decreased significantly. It's not the fluoride that's doing that. It's actually more the brushing that we're going in there, that we're cleaning out our mouth, that we're getting rid of the plaque, and physically removing that and washing it away.
Okay. This is a total sidebar, but since you brought up the hygiene thing, okay, there was a guy, and I'm going to murder his name, as Semmelweis.
Yeah.
Okay, is this one guy that basically, it sounds kind of disgusting, but apparently surgeons didn't used to wash their hands between
Nope.
operations. What's the deal there?
So Semmelweis was a physician, a labor delivery physician in Vienna in the 18. This was in the mid 18th century, 1800s, and he was the one who first started noticing that if he washed his hands between working on a dead cadaver and giving and helping a woman give birth, then the death rate went down significantly. It went down from like 25 to 30% down to 2%.
Oh,
And the interesting part of that is that they didn't understand germ theory at that point, but he was washing his hands with bleach to get rid of the smell of the cadaver of the dead body before he went in to deliver the baby. But the bleach was obviously killing everything. But he went with all of that data and tried to share it with the other doctors. And again, this is hygiene. It's not a drug solution. And the doctors ran him out of town. They ridiculed him, laughed at him, mocked him. I mean, he ended up in an insane asylum and died a couple years later because and what drove him crazy is it's such a simple concept, and no one will actually acknowledge or listen to it and do it. And there's so many lives that are getting lost because we don't acknowledge simple hygiene solutions.
so it's one of those you don't know what you don't know. And so, you got people that are saying, okay, maybe we ought to wash our hands. Okay. When did toothbrushing really kind of come into vogue?
Using a toothbrush came into vogue. I hope it is in vogue. I mean,
Well,
there's a lot of people that don't brush their teeth, and people brushing their teeth during COVID. Everybody, there was a lot less people brushing their teeth. But it really caught on during World War II. Prior to that, it wasn't a big thing, but they made the GIs brush their teeth during World War II, and when they came home from the war, that's when it really got started getting picked up.
interesting. And then the nasal sprays come in. So we've now got nasal hygiene. It'll be interesting to see, like 10 years from now, what kind of things we will realize, geez, well, that was a duh moment. We should have done that. You guys publish a lot of studies on your website. Why?
Because I believe that people should have access to the data that support the reason why they're using a product, especially something, like a hygiene product.
Okay. Now, I don't see anything wrong with that, but apparently one particular group did. And you know what I'm talking about. It's like, okay, this is the controversial side of the interview, folks. So tell me, you published some studies during COVID that basically said, geez, like washing your hands and brushing your teeth and cleaning your nose just might, help germs go away. And
Well,
somebody slapped your hand.
so first of all, we didn't publish. So the first couple of studies we didn't publish. The
Ah,
interesting part of
true.
this
Good point.
is that prior to 2020, so prior to COVID, the CDC had on its webpage that the way to treat a respiratory coronavirus infection
Hmm.
was actually through nasal hygiene, through nasal irrigation, using salt water to physically reduce the viral load of this coronavirus
Okay.
in the upper airway.
Yeah.
Um, and then COVID came along in 2020. By May of 2020, there had actually been a study done at the university or at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, where they took a bunch of people over the age of 65 and they had COVID. They tested positive. They had symptoms. They weren't symptomatic or whatever. They were sick, and they had them use, salt water.
Okay.
Every single one of those people was better in under a week.
Whoa.
Not a single one was ever hospitalized. In all of the studies that I'm aware of, where they were looking at anything applied in the nose, that was a nasal hygiene product, not necessarily a drug.
Hmm.
Not a single person has ever been hospitalized. I mean, they've done studies with baby shampoo, with nitric oxide, with xylitol, with iodine, with salt water, iota-carrageenan. I mean, there's a bunch of these things. There's a bunch of products out there that you can put into salt water
Hmm.
that help clean all of that out of your upper airway.
So do you sell drugs? Any drugs? Any of your products drugs?
Yeah, we have two that are drugs.
Okay.
Fluoride toothpaste is considered a drug. It's an OTC drug. And then we also have a nasal spray with an oxymetazoline, which is a decongestant.
Okay.
So if people really want a decongestant, they can use it, but it has the added benefit of the xylitol, so it moisturizes for a longer period of time. Also is going to block adhesion of bacteria and viruses and stuff like that.
Okay. But all the rest of your products, I mean, normal nasal spray, drug
Hygiene,
or not drug?
not drugs. Medical devices, cosmetics, because they clean.
Hmm.
So
Okay. There was recently an interesting thing, and a lot of people don't really know what it means. And so I want to see if I can get your help. I realize that you're not an attorney, and I'm not an attorney, and I don't play one on TV, but there was something called the Chevron
oh,
Doctrine that just got overturned. What in the world is the Chevron Doctrine, and why should people even care? Because apparently, a little company in Utah is making big waves because of the Chevron.
well, when I'm trying to think of how to say that quickly, but so back in 2020, when we started sharing a lot of these studies with the government, we sent all the data to the FDA, we sent it to the CDC, we sent it to everybody that could, and no one ever did anything. And then the FTC, which you know, a different agency altogether, they sent us a warning letter, and I mean they didn't call us or talk to us. We sent them all the data, we sent them the studies, and they said, oh, we don't like that. And so, but further down the road, they sued us, and really what they sued us for, it was for making false and misleading statements. But yet today, this lawsuit is still ongoing. They still have yet to show us a false and misleading statement we made, because we didn't make any false or misleading statements. And how this comes in with the Chevron deference is I believe it was 1984, the Supreme Court had that case, and it was Chevron versus somebody. And the Supreme Court gave the three-letter agencies in our government, or other agencies, broad latitude as to how they interpret a rule, how they interpret a law. And so the FTC had actually come out and said, well, you know, when the FTC was first organized, their charter was don't make false or misleading statements. Then they came back a little while later in the 1970s and said, well, a false and misleading statement is, and they gave some guidelines for what false and misleading meant. In 1998, they came out with other guidance which said a false and misleading statement is something that you don't have a study to back up what you're saying,
Okay.
okay, or experts in the field that would accept your reasoning. And that was what we worked with under for 20 years. And when the FTC sent us a warning letter and we sent them all the studies, they said that's not enough. And the funny part of it is during, in fact, it's not funny, it's sad. During COVID, we sent them all the studies, and they actually told us when we were deposing them in this ongoing lawsuit, they actually told us and said, we never opened the studies. It wasn't on the news, so it couldn't have been true. It couldn't possibly have been true because it wasn't in the news.
Wow.
And so they sued us, and that's why we're in a lawsuit. And they sued us under guidance that they then put out in 2022, a year after they sued us. They said, well, anything that you don't have two random controlled trials for is now considered false and misleading. But yet in 2021, they sued us under that guidance.
So they're moving the goalpost, number one.
They're moving the goalpost, but the reason why that should matter to people here in Utah and people all over the country is because if they have their way and that's how they're allowed to interpret false and misleading, the cost for your supplements is going to go through the roof. And it's going to shut down a lot of businesses because you can't, the pharmaceutical, and by the way, having two RCT studies for each product on the market,
Yeah.
that means two for this, two for this, two for this, two for this, two for
Yeah.
this. That's the way you
Right.
can interpret that rule.
Okay.
But if you have a vitamin C, you can't patent that.
Right.
But if you have a vitamin C and you want to put it out on the market and start a company, you now have to go do two RCT studies for each claim that you're putting on that.
Even though the vitamin C's already been used for forever.
That's
and
correct.
by other companies.
That's correct. Or the FTC can come after you.
Okay, dare I ask how much a study costs?
Anywhere when we were looking at doing one, it was upwards of $500,000 for a small one.
Whoa. So
And
every
so,
single product would cost over $1 million
oh, easy,
before you even sold
before you
one.
even sold one.
Okay.
And so that Utah has a very large nutraceutical industry,
Mm-hmm.
and especially for the population. You know, our population is what, 3.5, 4 million, 4 million,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in there. Um, you know, and so it's not huge, but compared to our population, it is. And that's something that I think that everybody in our state should be worried about, and I think that our local politicians should be concerned about it, but apparently they're not.
The name of this feature is Utah Success Stories. What's your definition of success?
Well, I mean, success in my career or success in my life, success in landing an airplane, success
Yeah,
in
yeah. Well, yeah, you've done some interesting things in all three of those. But
so success in my career. I think I realized that I was successful um, when I realized that I was able to sell a product, make money enough that I was living a comfortable life, and yet knowing that people who bought products that we sold, if they used them, they would actually save more money than it cost them to buy it. That they would save money. And what I mean by that is, I've been sick once in 25 years. Okay, my kids, you know, you and I've had this discussion. You just said this earlier. You don't get sick nearly as much when you're using a nasal
yeah,
hygiene product and when you're using something that actually controls and regulates the oral microbiome in your mouth. So you don't spend that much money on drugs, on pharmaceuticals. I mean, I could count on one hand the amount of money I've spent on pharmaceuticals in the past 25 years. So
yeah, interesting.
So that's the way I would consider it successful, and I think it's a great feeling.
With another Utah success story and Nate Jones from Xlear, I'm Doug Jessup.